Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the NRW. I'm your host today, Rob Medina, and I thank you all very much for joining me here today because today I'm going to be reviewing the movie Section 8. So there's a lot about this film that I want to get into here, but I only have so much time. But I will say that, when I first saw the trailer for this movie about, I think, 2 months ago, if I recall correctly, I was instantly hooked because the main reason why I wanted to see the movie was because of Scott Adkins. I'm a huge Scott Adkins fan. For those who don't know, I think he's an underrated actor, a phenomenal action star, but just a really good actor altogether. So anything that Scott Adkins is in, I'm going to watch no matter what. So I was definitely interested in seeing the movie because of that reason. Now, the other thing is because of the co-writer in this movie, who's also one of the executive producers in this film, and Chad Law. For anyone who doesn't know the name Chad Law, if you've seen the review that I've done on this channel for a movie called Daylight Sin that I did last year, this is the guy that wrote that movie. He also, I believe, also produced the film as well too. Ever since that film, I became a fan of him because I loved what he had written for that story. And then having talked to Gary Kearns, who he's also good friends with, who revealed about what the initial story was in the beginning before it turned into the film that we got that came out in 2016, there was a lot that had kept me invested about what his approach to storytelling was that I really did appreciate here, because he's one of those rare writers that whenever there's a production he's working on, he's there from start to finish, unless he's not going to be able to be there for one reason or another. But he's always there from start to finish. If you look at set photos of Daylight Sin, you're going to see him on the set as well too, talking with the actors or the production crew and so on and so forth. So he's there from beginning to end. And that's not something that happens very often. And when you do see that a writer is involved with that process from beginning to end, there's something that's going on there that makes me believe that this person is very influential with the overall story that we're following here in this final cut that we're going to be getting, and this film included. So having been a fan of what he's been able to do ever since I saw Daylight Sin, and seeing the films he's been doing since then and even before then as well too, I'm a fan of Chad. So anything that Chad's involved with, I'm going to be watching because I love the films he's done here, and especially the movie he did with Scott Adkins called Close Range, which is a film directed by Isaac Florentine, which is a film that I absolutely love and adore, that I think you all should watch as well too, along with Daylight Sin. But the thing is that his involvement with the production he's on here, every single one that I've come across here so far have been nothing but short of amazing, in my opinion. So I was expecting a lot of great things out of this movie, and I can truthfully say that I had a lot of fun with this film. One thing I want to point out too with this film is that Chad had pointed out in a previous interview that he had done rather recently that he basically wanted to bring back a lot of these old school action films that we've seen before from the 80s and 90s, where the characters are a lot of fun, but they have a lot of heart, and you are invested with the journey, and you're just going to have fun with this whole film from start to finish. And I definitely did get that with this movie. Now, the one thing I want to point out here with this review that I will be honest and say this is not a perfect film. There were some issues that it did have with the movie, but they weren't issues that I think were glaring in terms of like it's a major flaw on the film in itself. I think it's more about, in my opinion, has a lot to do with timing and accessibility and maybe funds as well too, that may have prevented certain things to flesh out the way that it needed to. And I think that's where some of the issues that I had with the film along the way. But having seen the film twice already, I did pick up on those details that I think were more or less sticking out for me, just due to the fact of timing, scheduling, among other things as well too, that I think a lot may have factored in with what I've noticed in the film that stuck out for me as a problem, which I'll point out with my negatives in this review here along the way. But with this review, I'm just going to get straight into it here, because basically with this particular story, we're following the character of Jake, who has avenged his family, his wife and his son, who have been killed in the beginning of the film, and had killing the men that had killed his family. He ends up serving some time in prison, and then is get pulled out by the secret government agency to they're pretty much telling him, you're going to work for us here, but telling him in a way that's kind of diplomatic, if you will. And he reluctantly agrees to do so. And then along the ways, he discovers some things aren't really what they seem to be. And that's pretty much the whole film right there in a nutshell. So as far as my first positive is concerned, right away, I'm going to say that I think that the cast in this movie, in my opinion, have done a phenomenal job with this film, because there's one thing about Chad's movies that I always come across that I figured that is always one of the reasons why his films work so well, is that the films he's worked on always managed to get great actors in these parts where they deliver some really heavy moments in the movie where you really feel the weight of the consequences of the characters and what the journey they're going through. And yet you are still invested, whether you agree with the journey or not, but you're still invested with the story. And I would say for the most part, you would side with the characters, whether you know a lot about them or not, but you understand the purpose of what they're going through, and it makes sense for the story. So that way, when you get to that character arc at the end of the film, it all makes sense and it was not a waste of time. And that's exactly what I got with this movie, because I will point out that Ryan Kwanten, I think he pronounced his name. If I mispronounced his name, I apologize, who was the lead in this movie. I'm not going to say that I was hesitant about him being the lead in the film, especially in an action film of this sort, but I was just curious to see what he was going to do for this genre, if you will. And I can truthfully say that he does a really good job. When it came to the dramatic aspect of the character that we see in this movie, I knew he was going to do great, because if you watch a show like True Blood, which is one of his most famous roles he's done, when it came to some of the more goofy side and the dramatic side of the character that he played in that show, he did that phenomenally. In this movie, it's very little of the goofy side, because you get to see some nice softer moments with the character, which he does phenomenal in this film. But when it comes to like the more dramatic beats of this story, I knew he was going to deliver in that respect. I was just more curious to see how he's going to handle the action side of it, because I've never really seen him do an action film before, not one that I can recall. And having seen what he does in this movie, you could tell there are certain moments here and there that it was not him at all doing certain sequences that occurred in this film when it came to the fight choreography. But as far as everything else is concerned, he did a phenomenal job, in my opinion. And I was actually really happy to see that he was able to carry the weight that's required for this character in telling the story along the way. So when it came to the lead, we have a hero that we can follow who, in my opinion, the actor does a really good job in effectively telling the story and truly showcasing the conflict that they're going through along the way, especially when it came to being reluctantly agreeing to partake in this organization, which is called Section 8, that has apparently been it was shut down before, and then kind of came back up again somehow, some way, shape, or form, which you find out in the film along the way. But it's interesting to see how, even though he's reluctant and is agreeing to go through with this here and going through these missions where he finds out that they're pretty much a assassin for hire, if you will, and he does not want to partake in that, but goes with it anyways, you get to see moments of hesitation and moments of conflict where he's just questioning what his motivation really is, because this is his getting out of jail free card, because having murdered the men that had killed his family, he served some time in prison, but then he's getting pulled out as an exchange. Hey, you do this here with us, you don't have to go back in prison. Plus, you don't want to stay in prison here, because you clearly have some skills that are much more valuable being used out here than it is being trapped in there. And he wants to serve his time. Like, he felt like, I've done the crime, I'm serving the time, but eventually is forced out of the situation where he has to go through with it, despite his disagreements with it. So you get to see that this character was forced into the situation, and it makes a lot of sense. And you get to see the reluctance that he's going through right now, where he's questioning his motivation. And then you have moments where you get to really see the type of person he really is, where he is a good person who's looking out for the best interest of those he loves, including his uncle, played by Mickey Rourke, who's in the film for a good bit. But I have some things to say about his character, but not terrible, but just some things that I was a little iffy about. But the point I'm getting is that you have somebody you can certainly side with here, and you understand their motivation, so that when you go through that character arc, especially when you get to the very end, where all those questions he has about what he's really trying to accomplish here, what he really wants to pursue, and what's he really fighting for, you get that to the point at the end of the movie where you realize that everything he had gone through made sense. So that way, when you get to the end of the film, in hopes that we get a sequel, everything adds up correctly here, and everything adds up to where it makes a lot of sense for you as an audience member can side with the character along the way. So I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but the point is that I think that he did a really good job with that in performing the character of Jake in this film. Now, the other character that I want to point out does have to do with the villain played by Dermot Mulroney, whose name's escaping me. Oh, his name is Ramsey. This is a villain that I actually did appreciate a lot, because Dermot is one of those guys, in some ways, at least in most of the films I've come across here, he's always playing more or less like the lead guy, where he's a good-looking guy, and he's kind of more or less playing a heartthrob. In this movie, that's not the case at all. He's playing a guy who, in a lot of ways, you don't trust from the very beginning. But when you get to know the character more and more along the way, you get to see those kinks in the armor, where you realize that people that are under him are questioning him, and they're questioning for the very good reason that he's making some pretty bad judgment call, especially in bringing over the character of Jake, played by Ryan, where they can clearly see that this guy's a liability, because he is not on board, at least not fully on board, with what we're all about. and he's going to be a problem for us. And one of the underlings for the character of Ramsey is pointing that out to him, and he's questioning him. And when you get to see that moment of the character where he's very vulnerable and he's questioning that himself along the way, that's something that I really did appreciate about, where you get to see that character in that moment where he is open to, where he's listening to someone pointing out those flaws, and he has to accept that. And now he's learned to have to question that along the way as well too. And now he's going to try to find a way to remove that problem, in this case, killing the character of Jake for disobeying orders, if you will. So I think that's something that Durbin did a really good job in showcasing, where you get to see a vulnerability, you see a side of compassion, but you also see a side of him where he's very, very curt and very aggressive along the ways, where he's not willing to take chances on anybody, no matter who they are. And you get to see all those fluctuations of emotions where these characters go through along the way. And I think he did a really good job in showcasing that effectively, in my opinion. So you know who the bad guy is, you know who the good guy is, you know what their flaws are, and when they're clashing with each other, you're wanting the hero to overcome the villain. And I think they did a really good job in showcasing that here, because that's one of the things that Chad wanted to accomplish here, where you have just the standard fare we have seen before from the 80s and 90s, where you know who the good guys are, you know who the bad guys are, and you want to side with the villains, but you want to connect with them along the way. But you also understand the villain. I'm sorry, I meant to say the hero, but you also understand the villain along the way to truly understand where the purpose is. So that way, when the hero and the villain clash, it makes sense and it's not a wasted opportunity. And I think they did a really good job in showcasing that here too. Now, one other thing I want to point out to with regards to some of the other characters in this film, and I won't be able to get through all of them here, but two actors I'm going to point out here. Scott Adkins. Scott Adkins in this movie is awesome. I felt like there were certain parts of the film that I felt like his character wasn't used effectively at certain points, which I'll point out on my negative. But when he's in the film, you definitely feel his presence, and his presence is felt hard. And I think that's one thing that I really did appreciate about this character, where he's basically like the one guy that the character of Ramsey, played by Dermot, brings in as, hey, we've got a problem, I need you to fix it. And he's the guy that will do it like that in a heartbeat without questions asked, so long as he's getting paid for it, of course. And then we also have the character of that Dolph Lundgren plays, whose name escapes me right now. But this is a character that I also found to be quite complex in a lot of ways too. But I guess I'm going to kind of point this out as more or less my negative here. But this is more a mixed feeling I have about the character, because even in the beginning of the movie, when you get the introduction of these two characters between Dolph and Ryan's character, where they were working together in the military, he was a colonel as well too, that I knew right away there was something off about that relationship. I mean, we knew that they had a strong connection with each other, but as far as like the relationship is concerned, I felt like the Dolph character right away was someone that you could not trust. And as the story starts to progress along the way, if you watch the film again, certain things that you noticed before or that you didn't notice before, as the film progresses, you start to pick up now. Like, oh, now it makes sense why he's there. Now it makes sense why he's bringing this up. Now it makes sense why he's giving him these answers as far as Ryan's character is concerned, because it all is a part of a major plan that gets revealed at the end of the film, which I don't think I'll reveal here for you guys, but it's not something that we have not seen before. But when it gets all revealed in the end of the movie, it makes sense. Now, some people may find it to be rather cheesy. Some people may think it's fantastic. I was actually okay with it. I was actually quite entertained by it. But I will also point out too that with the character that Dolph plays in this movie, I thought he did a pretty good job in showcasing some of those conflictions that he goes through as well too. That made me question where his real motivation was. But we do get some aspect of it, but at the same time, we don't really get every answer, which is something I did appreciate about this character as well too. Now, as far as the action is concerned in this movie, this is the one thing I really was looking forward to, because Scott Adkins is in the movie, and he's going to be doing some shootout sequences, and there's going to be some fight sequences as well too. They were all handled quite well. In my opinion, I think that's one of the things that I really did enjoy about the film the most, to be completely frank with you, outside of the actors and the performances here. I will also point out too that I think I'm not sure if it's a fair assessment to make, but for anyone who's seen the film Daylight's End, The Brave, I would even say Sinners and Saints and Jarhead 3, those are films that are directed by Will Kaufman along with The Marine 4. If you look at those shootout sequences, they are some of the best I've ever seen in my life. I think he's so good at compositing those shots together, especially when you look at the movie like The Brave. Like, that's some top tier level stuff right there. I have a gut feeling that Chad probably took a lot of influence from his experience working with Will Kaufman on those sets. and bringing that over to this production here. And what we get in those shootout sequences actually work quite well, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of those influences from Will Kaufman that were definitely infused in this movie. At least that's my perspective here. I'm not sure if maybe Chad may want to confirm that here, but I certainly do believe that's the case here. But as far as the overall story is concerned, we have this character who is basically wanting to get away from this organization who is trying to kill him now because he made a decision to not want to follow through with some orders that were given to him. And then as a result of that, he's being chased after to be taken out, if you will. And that right there is one of the reasons why I think the story worked quite well, because you get the time to develop with those moments with the character. So that way, when he's at that breaking point, you understand his motivation now, but he's still questioning himself along the way. And then when it comes to the end of the story, as I mentioned before, he comes to that full character arc where you're learning that he has a new set of motivations where now he's finding a purpose for himself, and hopes that we can get a sequel here. So hopefully you guys will check out the film as well too. So as of right now, that's going to be the end of my positives here, but now let's get into my negatives. Now with my negatives, the one thing I want to point out here is that I think a lot of the negatives that I've come across here has to do with simply more or less maybe the scheduling with certain actors, or scheduling with the production or sets, or whatever the case may be. And maybe a lot of it also has to do with just funds as well too, because there's certain things that I noticed that weren't really as fleshed out as well in some sequences that were more fleshed out in other sequences. So I think a lot of it has to do with certain decisions that were being made to kind of, I wouldn't say cut corners, but just focus on telling certain parts of the story that I thought were done more effective than others. Like, for example, the character that Mickey Rourke plays, I actually like the character he plays. Mickey Rourke is one of those actors that's going to deliver, in my opinion, no matter what. But when it came to the character, there were certain aspects about that character that I felt like were left out when it came to some things that occurred in the beginning of the film that was more or less directly involving our lead here with Ryan playing the character of Jake, that led to the death of his family. I felt like there were certain aspects about that part of the character's backstory that we needed more of here to really get certain things fleshed out and truly understand where Ryan's character is very protective of his uncle. And we do get to learn along the way, especially towards the end of the film, where there is a bigger story behind these two characters that you get to learn about. But I would like to have seen a little bit more of that in the beginning of the film, when you get to see where all this stuff came to be. But instead, it's more or less a lot of exposition, which I think did work effectively to a point. But when it came to some other characters, like I'm going to say Scott Adkins' character. Scott Adkins' character, it was someone that I hate to say it like this, but he certainly was used effectively for the purposes of the story. But I didn't feel like he was used to his full potential, if that makes any sense, because there were certain aspects of the character that I truly did enjoy, that I thought was phenomenal. But then once he was gone, I felt like I forgot about him, where I know that Scott is more than capable of pulling off and leaving a lasting impression here. So when a character's there, you notice him right away. You pick up where he last left off, and you remember that how effective this guy really was. But once he's gone, and you kind of forgot about him after that point. So I felt like in that respect, that's where the character was not used to his full potential. For me to remember this guy's still around, that he's going to fuck shit up along the way. I feel like that was one aspect of the character that could have been handled differently to be able to make that more effective. You can remember that this is a looming figure that's out there, and he's going to fuck shit up along the way. So I feel like that was one thing that could have been worked on here more. The other thing I also want to point out too, it certainly has to do with I wouldn't say our villain. I'm trying to be very careful I can point this out without spoiling too much here, but the villain and Dolph Lundgren's character. These are two characters that I thought were very good, in my opinion. The biggest issue that I have with the two characters, that when you learn about what really is going on behind the scenes, certain aspects about that relationship along the way, especially when you learn about more or less Dolph's character's real motivation, it was left questionable for me personally. I felt like there were some things that just wasn't really fleshed out as well. And again, I think a lot of it may have to do with simply timing, where There may be certain things that they couldn't really flesh out and effectively, at least to be able to shoot certain sequences, to be able to have the time with the character to really see that play itself out. But instead, it's all done more or less through exposition by the character or through other people that are talking about that said character there. So I felt like that was something that was a missed opportunity. But because we have answers that were given to us along the way, I understand the motivation. I understand to some degree where they were coming from. But I also felt like there were certain things that were just a lot of missed opportunities when it came to certain aspects of certain characters along the way that could have been fleshed out a little bit more to be able to fill in those gaps without having to be told through exposition, which was done effectively, but it's just enough to understand it, but not really truly connect with it, if that makes any sense here. So I think that's going to be the end of my negatives here. I really can't think of anything else off the top of my head right now that comes to mind here, but that's going to be the end of my negatives. So now let's get into my rating. Now, I really did like the film. I didn't love the movie, but I truly did enjoy the film a great deal. This is a film that I definitely would go out of my way to buy on Blu-ray, but to say once it gets released on physical media, because I still collect the stuff, as you can tell from behind me here. But I will definitely go out of my way to buy this movie, and it's available for you guys to rent on Amazon Prime. You can also buy it there as well too, and I believe it's available on AMC Plus, if I recall correctly, where you guys can check out the film on that platform there. So I highly recommend you guys all check it out, because this is a film that I think a lot of people will come to enjoy, just have a good time with here, and then enjoy the rest of the day as well too. So for me, I would give this movie a raise a glass. And those are my thoughts on the film. If you have seen the movie, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And make sure you subscribe to the channel, share, like our videos, and hit the notification bell while you're down there. And also follow NRW on social media. On Instagram, New Release Wednesdays. On Facebook, Nerds Rule the World. And on Twitter, @the NRW. And you can follow me on my social media accounts. On Instagram and Twitter, Mr. Rob Medina. And on Facebook, simply just Rob Medina. And I have a show on the channel called You're So Cool with Rob Medina. And I already have an episode that's uploaded today on the channel with my guest, Mr. Winston Hodges, who's a comedian who I think is hilarious. I love this conversation I had with him. It's the second time I had the conversation with him after my first one a week later, and this is a conversation that took place back in the beginning of April of this year. So it took a long time for me to get this uploaded, but it's available for you guys to check out. Hope you guys enjoyed it, because there's a lot of things to talk about where I'm from originally here, and some little aspects of that town as well too that I think you guys will get a kick out of. So make sure you guys check that out, and hope you guys will like it and enjoy it as well too. Also, make sure you follow the show's social media accounts as well too. On Instagram, You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and on Twitter, You're So Cool WRM. And that's gonna be it for my review, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed. Until next time, stay safe out there, and cheers.